Data driven, what does it mean and how to use it for growth? In the work that I do as a strategist, data is very, very important. That's one of the first areas that I go to after sitting down with either the business owner or the business leaders and trying to understand exactly what are we trying to resolve, what question are we trying to answer, what issue are we trying to respond to, what opportunity are we trying to take advantage of. But data is very, very important, and we're going to take a step back a little bit and really look at this and then move forward with it. So when we talk about data, it's really important to understand exactly what data is. Sometimes we hear words and things like that, and we don't always um, understand exactly what they mean and what they are. So let's see if we can do that a little bit. So data basically is just facts and or statistics collected together for reference or analysis. So it's some type of entity, um, usually numerical, doesn't have to be that we're going to look for to get some type of reference about something else or to use it to analyze to get something else out of it. It can be a collection or discrete values, part or whole that convey information describing quantity, fact, statistics, or other basics, meanings, or sequences of symbols that may be further interpreted. So again, it's oftentimes is discrete values, right? And then we want to put those things together, and hopefully, by putting that together, we can now make it useful to something else that we want to do, some type of decision that we want to hopefully move forward with. But again, as you see in this point here, it can be a number of different things. It's not just a collection of numbers. It could be respondents to a question that you have, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. Now, in terms of data, it can be presented in a couple of different ways. It can be just a datum, and the datum is basically just an individual value in a collection of data. So let's say that I have a spreadsheet, and I've got different rows and columns or whatever in it. And one of the entries that I'm looking to look at as part of my database is say um, men over 50, and I got a whole list of that, and I got names. I got names, and then I got their ages. I got different other descriptive information about them, their age, their weight, their color, and all of that. Well, if I just take person X, that's just a datum. That's just one data point in that database. So that's what we consider a datum. Now, it can also be in a data set. And a data set is an ordered collection of relatable data, usually arranged in a table format with column and row. So that's normally what you'll see like in a Excel spreadsheet. Um, we consider that a data set. It could be one or more spreadsheets within a data set, but a data set is just a collection of relatable data. And the important thing is that all the data that's in that set is relatable in one way or another. And that's what's important to remember. Now, data can also be structured or unstructured. Structured data is data that has been organized into a formatted repository, typically data that its elements can be made addressable for effective processing. So in a structured data, it's really organized into a format that we can really do some work with it and analyze and do some things with it. Unstructured data, on the other hand, qualitative data, I'm going to get into that in a minute, cannot be collected. That's a data set, but it's not structured. It's considered unstructured because we really can't do anything with it using tools that we would normally use, like if we want to analyze, say, uh, let's say we want to do a method and see what's the mean or what's the mode or any other variables that we might want to look at statistically. You can't do that analyzing customer comments. Now, there are various types of data that we have, and there are basically two types and four categories. So most of the data that you're going to use is going to want to fall into one of these two types or these four categories of data. The first type is qualitative data. And the type of data that can't be counted or measured easily using numbers, usually done by category. So example, somebody's gender or ethnicity. Let's say you're doing some type of social science type of analysis, and excuse me, and in that data set, you're looking at people's gender or ethnicity or those types of things. Well, that's qualitative type of data. If you're doing surveys and things like that, um, those are qualitative types of data. That's a qualitative type. Now, qualitative has two different types of categories within it. Okay, one is called nominal. Are Nominal data is these are sets of values that don't possess a natural order. Okay, so these are sets that don't possess data items can't be compared to another. So example, I can use like the color of a smartphone, right? We don't compare a red versus a red is greater than a blue. They're just two different types of phones. Okay, or whether it's mid-range budget segment or premium smartphone, it is just what it is. And so those are nominal types of qualitative data. The other type is ordinal that comes under qualitative, and these types of values have a natural ordering while maintaining their class of values. Example might be the size of clothing that can easily be sorted, whether it's from small, medium, large, or grading test system. A plus is better than a B grade. So those are types of qualitative types of data that we look at. Now, the other category, the other type that we have is quantitative, and this is probably the kind that you're used to mostly here. This data type quantifies things, and it does so by considering numerical values that can make it countable. And for instance, like price of a smartphone, that's a numerical value that we can actually look at and do something with. And under quantitative, we have two categories again. Discrete, these numerical values which fall under this are integers and whole numbers that are placed. The category data is often identified through charts and bar charts and pie charts. So this is the kind of stuff that you'll normally see in your data tables or through charts, including bar charts or pie charts. That's called discrete quantitative data. So that's the type of data that is. And then we have continuous. So remember, discrete are whole numbers. Continuous now is not, they're going to be fractional type of numbers that are considered continuous values. And things like operating frequency of electronics or temperature of the weight of a human being. So there might be something like, let's say a weight of a human being is 158.7 pounds. Okay, that would be considered continuous and not discrete. So those are the different types of data that you're probably going to be working with. You got qualitative and you got quantitative. Now there are different sources of data. And there's basically three sources of data that you'll be dealing with mostly. So we've got primary data. And primary source data that you collect yourself. It's your firsthand data. And that could be like let's say you're tracking some types of things, the number of visitors to your websites. Okay, that's your own data. You may be looking at your financials, whether it's your balance sheet, your income statement, or your statement of cash flows, any of those. Surveys, questionnaires, experiments, or other own resources. So anything that you do yourself that's yours, that's considered primary data. Now, there's also secondary data. Source of data is collected by someone other than the primary user. It could be from the government, published and or unpublished articles or reports, research organizations. Both of these I use a lot. So for instance, if I'm doing a consulting engagement and the owner or the business leader is saying that we're having a problem with revenues or profits or something like that. Well, one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at 3 to 5 years and do a historical review of their financials, especially their income statement, their P&L. I may even do it with their balance sheet because I'm trying to look for any anomalies. I'm going to use surveys and questionnaires and other types of things, but I'm also going to use secondary research, especially from the government, things like macro and micro economics information. I may do some benchmarking stuff and get some secondary information from the S&P 500 and find out what are other peers of theirs doing in terms of growth and things like that. So, and we'll get into some of that a little bit later, but that's how you might use primary and secondary. So these are two types of data sources that you'll probably be using as you look to do things with your own organization. And then the third one is called syndicated. And syndicated is data that you purchase from a research firm or something like that. And oftentimes you'll see consumer goods companies, especially retail companies, they'll use a lot of syndicated data where they may go to a research organization that is doing research on certain consumer sects and may purchase that information, like buyer behavior information and things like that. So that's another type of source of data that you may use. And so as you can see that when we talk about data, we want to be a little bit more specific about what we're doing, and you'll see why in a minute. We've got different types of data that we can tap into, and then we've got different types of sources. And it's important that you understand this information as you move forward with your decision making, and you'll see why as we move forward. So when we look at this thing called data driven, what really is that? The more you know, the better decisions that you can make. And that's really, really important, because at the end of the day, if you're leading and running your own business, or either whether you're working for someone, the most important asset that you have to and with and for that company is your decision making capability. And that goes from knowledge, kind of knowledge you have, experience you have, but there's nothing that substitutes for good decision making. So again, the more you know, the better decisions that you can make. Data is an input to the decision making process. So as you go about making decisions, daily and often many throughout the day, oftentimes those decisions are fueled by data, and it may be data that's stored in your head. It may be data that you've looked at throughout the day, but some type of data has been an input ingredient into that decision making process that you're going to be engaging with. When it comes to the data source that you're going to use, remember that data source is or are informed by the question you are seeking to answer. So we don't just pick a data source or some type of data just out of the air. There's always context involved with the data source that you're going to be. Context matters a lot. So whether you're trying to decide whether you want to grow or not, whether you want to decide, do you want to be in business anymore? Should you shut down the business? Do you want to decide, do I need to hire more people? Do you want to decide, do I want to join forces with someone and move forward in a joint venture or be acquired by someone or anything like that? The data source that you are going to use to help you decide and answer that is based on the question you are seeking to answer. So that always leads and informs the data source that you're going to use. And remember, there are various types of data sources out there, whether it's primary, secondary, or syndicated, various types. And again, that is based on the data source that you choose, or the data sources that you choose. They are informed by the question you are seeking to answer. Now, being data rich doesn't mean that you have insight. It's just that means that you have a lot of data. What's important, the key is, how do you turn that noise into insights? The data basically is just a resource. It's all it is. It's a resource. And again, as we talked about earlier, data is an input to decision making. So if you have a lot of data, that in and of itself doesn't mean a whole lot. right? Because we don't make decisions off of data, and you'll see that in just a second. So it just means that you have a lot of data, and it may not even be good data for you to even be able to make decisions off of. So remember, what we need to do is be able to at a very, very high level, how do we turn that noise, the data, into insights? Data is worthless without interpretation. It's not so much about big data, but about big insights. And that's what we want, right? So data in and of itself is worthless if it can't be interpreted, because it's not so much about big data or having a lot of data. It's about big insights. That's where decision making is made, is off of insights. It's not made up of data. You must be able to achieve meaningful insights and turn insights into effective decision making. You must be able to achieve meaningful insights and turn insights into effective decision making. So we know that there's some kind of process, right? There's some kind of process that we go, because we know that data is just an input to the decision making process that we're going to be involved in, and we know that our data sources are informed by the question that we're seeking to answer. And we know that it's not basically about having a whole lot of data. It's about, can we glean, can we lift out, can we surface up the insights that are most important to decision making? And we know basically data basically in and of itself is worthless without interpretation. So we can look at that process. So when we look at data informed decision making process, there's a process here. At the bottom, and what we'd like to get to is get from the bottom to the top of the pyramid. Okay. And excuse me. And at the bottom, we have data. And we've done a lot of work. And we talked a lot about data so far, right? I don't have any questions yet. I don't see. So we've talked a lot about data so far, what it is, the different types of data it is, the different sources of data, and what does it mean to be data driven, right? What does it mean? It means that, you know, that data is an input to our decision making process, but it's not the end all, right? So as part of this process in journeying from the bottom of the pyramid to the top, we want to move from data to information, right? But moving from data to information, that only happens with the intervention of the mind, right? So now we're starting to think about and look at and analyze the data. So now we're trying to take this data that we have, whatever it may be, and we're trying to turn it into information. And when we look at what information is, it refers to that which has the power to inform. Okay, now we're starting to get somewhere. It's what is conveyed or represented by a particular arrangement or sequence of things. It's a sequence or symbols that carries a message, a set of items in which meaning is conveyed. So now we're starting to maybe get something out of this data, and it has meaning to us, which is starting to inform us about something. Stimuli that has meaning in some context for its receiver. So now we're starting to get somewhere. So at the bottom, we just had a bunch of data, and this data was informed by the question we're trying to answer. We just collected a bunch of data. Now we've got to start to make sense of, is there any information here, right? But in order to move from data to information, we've got to have the intervention of the mind. And now we can move up the chain of the pyramid up to information. But really, information, we don't make decisions off information. We've got to get to insights, because insights is really where decision making happens. We make decisions off the insight. But moving from information to insights, that only happens with the intervention of imagination. We have to be able to really understand and look at and imagine, what is this information now telling us? What can we glean from this information now? When we look at what insights is, it's the capacity to gain an accurate and deep intuitive understanding of a person or a thing. Well, our thing is this data that we have. What can we intuitively see and gain from this? The act or result of apprehending the inner nature of things, or seen intuitively. We've got to be able to see it. See, that's why moving from information to insight, it only happens with the intervention of your imagination. You have to be able to imagine what's in there and see it and lift it off the page. It's the ability to perceive clearly or deeply. The most valuable insights come from rigor and serious analysis. So again, in this one data set, this one data table, or whatever you have, we need to move what's on that paper or on that computer screen or whatever form you have it in. We need to move that from just being data into information and now into insights, because insights is where decision making happens. If you stop at information and don't get to insights, you may be making decisions off the wrong thing. That may not be what's actually saying what that data is telling you, right? So we need to be able to get to the level of insights, because now we've really got into this data, and now we're really looking at it in a deep level, and we can clearly see what it's trying to tell us. And so that's why it goes back to the source of data that you choose, right? The source of data that you choose is informed by the question that you're trying to answer. And so that's really important, is what question are we really trying to answer? And because at the end of the day, we're trying to make decisions about and refer to that question. So we've talked about data, what it is. We've talked about different types of data. We've talked about different sources of data. We've talked about being driven by data, and we've talked about and looked at what does the data-informed decision-making process look like. And so now, once we got to that point, now we can start to say, okay, well, what does that have to do with this thing called growth? So when we talk about growth, and I need you guys to kind of speak up to me now and interact with me a little bit. When we're talking about growth from a business perspective, what are we talking about? What defines growth from a business perspective? Anyone? I got two chats. Let me see what I'm seeing. You guys can unmute yourself and holler out if you want now. I would appreciate that. Profits, Larry. Okay. Okay. Is it really profits? Because I can financially engineer profits, right? All I gotta do is cut my costs. Right? Anybody else? Anyone else? Come on, you guys, interact with me. When we talk about growth from a business perspective, what are we really talking about? Are we talking about the number of people we hire? Are we talking about expanding to a different location? What are we talking about?
Well, all that would be growth.
Would it? From a business perspective? From a business perspective.
Well, market share would be growth. And you're going to hire more employees. You're going to possibly open up more locations.
Right. But I could also go broke with just market share, right? If my costs are too higher than the revenue that I'm bringing in, trying to buy market share. So and so I understand your logic, and that's great, H2. I appreciate that. When we talk about growth from a business perspective, there's really only one area that defines growth, and that's revenue. If your revenue isn't growing, your business isn't growing. Because everything else, I can grow market share, but that doesn't mean that I'm growing revenue or profits. Because if it costs me too much to grow that market share, then I'm gonna be losing on the bottom line. So when we talk about growth of a business, it's revenue. It's the top line. Top line drives everything, because what we want to do is and that's why I was telling you that if I'm working on a consulting engagement and the business owner or business leader saying that we're having a problem with revenues or profits, whatever, one of the first things I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at the revenue. How much revenue are we been able to drive to the bottom line, right? I'm going to look at revenue growth, right? And so one of the things that I talked to you guys about that I mentioned earlier is secondary data as a resource, right? And one of the areas I may look at is I may go to S&P 500 and find out, okay, for this particular sector, industry, category, and segment, what is the average peer growth in revenue year to year, right? So when I often ask companies with respect to growth, and they say, well, we're doing well, we're growing. First question I'm asking is, how do you know that? How do you know that? If you can't tell me that we are at least growing with our market, then you're not growing. Because if you tell me, well, we grew 13% year over year, what if your market grew 28%? You're underperforming the market. So we have to be at least market perform. We don't want to be under market. So that's a form of data that you want to have. That's a form of data. So when we're talking about growth from a business perspective, always top line, because I can financially engineer bottom line growth. I can do that easily, and that's what a lot of companies are starting to do now. When you see these companies starting to lay off people, the first place and the easiest place to cut costs is headcount, because that's usually your largest cost category. So what they're trying to do is financially engineer their bottom line and their EPS so that the analysts on the market won't hammer their stock price. But those analysts aren't that stupid. They know what they're doing. All they got to do is go look at your top line and see what is your growth year over year, quarter to quarter. Is it in line with what you've been doing? So when we talk about growth, we're looking at top line now. There may be other areas also that we're going to look at. Like you said, H2, we may look at the bottom line, right? Market share may be an area that we look at to see if there's a problem there, that we're underperforming there, that's inhibiting growth on the top line and or the bottom line. But we're always going to, when we look at growth of a company, is basically designed by for a for-profit company is, are your revenues growing? That determines whether you're growing as a company or not. Now, when we look at growth, there's various types of growth, right? We've got, let me go back one. There's basically three types. You've got organic, inorganic, and a combination. So when we say organic growth, that's growth that's derived from inside the four walls of the company. So it's the internal resources of the company that informed that particular revenue growth. When we talk about inorganic, that comes from outside the company. And that normally happens with either a joint venture or some type of M&A activity where you've gone and acquired or bought another company or something like that. That's normally where inorganic growth comes from. And what's funny is oftentimes, especially at publicly traded companies, you'll see that some CEOs are organic driven CEOs and some are inorganic. Oftentimes you don't find ones that are good at both. It's usually one or the other, right? If you find one that's good at both, you got a really good CEO, and then the other one is a combination. So you can have a combination of some percentage of 60% of your growth is organic and 40% of it is inorganic. And you may see that in their annual report. I use that a lot when I was working for the large consultancy to gain information. To gain information, I would look at the financial reports, the annual reports of the company to find out what is the CEO saying, where they're going. You know, another type of a good secondary is listen to, and a lot of large corporations do this, is they'll listen to what the president is saying, the president of the United States and or the governor of the state, to figure out where are they putting their priorities at. Because wherever their priority is, that's where the money is going. That's where the budget is going. And that can or cannot create opportunities for business, depending on if they do business to provide services or offerings in those areas where the money is really going to, where they're emphasizing. So those are the types of things. Again, those are different types and sources of information that you want to get. Remember, we talked about published reports and unpublished reports. So when we talk about growth, in terms of the types we're talking about, is basically three types: organic, which is driven by internal resources of the company; inorganic, which comes from growth stimulated from outside the company, whether we go and buy it by buying another company who's already got revenues in that particular area we want to move into, or we do a joint venture with someone or something like that, or it could be a combination of both. It could be a combination of both. Those are the types of growth that you'll be looking at for your company. Now, where does data fit into this? Data is very important because when you're thinking about growth, those decisions regarding should be well thought out. Well thought out. And remember, part of that decision making, that input process, is data. And we turn data into information and information into insights. So if you're thinking about growth, then many think data is an end all, but it's not as appropriate decision making is. And when we're thinking about growth, where, how, one of the questions may be, why do I think we need to grow? And we kind of talked about that, right? Because we've looked at some data about our industry and our category and our segment, the business that we have, and we've seen that on average, businesses in this area are growing at 13% year over year, and my business is only growing at 3%. So I've got a problem here. I'm not even performing with my peers on an average. Let's know those that are growing at 28%. I'm not looking at the one that's underperforming because I'm one of those. I have to get at least to market perform or average with my peers, right? So again, you want to be able to have that data, that information, and then that insights, excuse me, to understand that, is there an issue here with respect to growth? And that's how data comes into play with answering that question. Well, why? Why? Where? Data comes into play there. Where is this growth going to come from? Where's that going to happen? How? How do I grow? Is there an opportunity out there in the marketplace that we haven't found or taken complete advantage of? That provides an opportunity for my business, my service, my offering to grow. Like, for instance, let's say you're thinking about expanding your business for growth. Well, one thing you want to understand is where should we expand to and why? Where should we expand to and why? Got you. Thanks. And so where and why? So one of the things you might want to look to is the area that you're thinking about expanding into. You may want to go to the government database, the census database, and see, okay, on average, my service costs X. Well, I want to find out what's the per capita income of that particular area I want to move into, because I need to know if they can actually afford my offering in that area. If you don't know that, you may be moving to an area that can't even afford your service, or that service is not in need. Let's say you have a hair salon, okay, and you're thinking about expanding to another area, right? And you go to a database, and there's several various databases, National Federation of Independent Businesses, or again to the census, and find out that this particular area, well, there are 1,000 hair salons already in the area I'm going to. Well, does that make sense for me to move to that area? Maybe I want to think about moving to another area where it's not as congested, where it's not as dense a population of the business that I'm having. So again, this is how data helps you. It helps you make better decisions. It helps you inform your decision making. So it's a higher quality decision making that you're making, because at the end of the day, in business, there are winners and losers. And what we want to be in business is we want to be winners. And data helps inform those decisions that we're going to make so that we can make better decisions for the health and sustainability of our business. And so you want to make sure that again that you have an understanding of the different types of data and data sources that are available, but you also want to be able to make the data choices that you choose, that you can actually surface that data from just data itself to information, and from information to insights, because it's from the insights is where you're going to make better informed decisions about your business and enhance the growth opportunities of your business, because you'll be making better decisions regarding those growth questions. Um, um, that's what I have prepared um, for you guys regarding this particular subject and the time that we have. I want to now open up the for you guys. Maybe you have questions that you want to ask me. Feel free about anything that we've talked about. I think we have about another 10 minutes or so. Please, anyone, questions? Hopefully, this information was helpful for you in some way. Um, Larry, Michelle, H2, Harold, you guys have any questions for me? Hope I didn't put you to sleep.
No questions for me. I really appreciated, Mr. Clinton, the time you took to put this together. I'm looking to try to start using data more in the future. That's why I wanted to listen in to see what you know how the topic would affect me and my business.
What kind of
And
business do you have?
I'm in an insurance claims business. I do property claims for fire damage, water damage, up and down the state of California. So I'm looking to start looking at data in terms of how I can utilize my business actually in other areas that I'm not utilizing it in.
Right.
So that's why I said let me see what's there, and I appreciate the information you provided. And H2 and Harold are the same people. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I just opened it. I had to open up on two different computers because one I can listen to on my earpiece, and the other one, just depending on what you were saying, I could look at the data. So I really appreciate it, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for being there. Yeah, for what you're doing, is very important. Data, because a lot of decision making that you're going to be doing is based off of data, whether it's primary or secondary data. You may look at, okay, what is the percentage of let's just say African Americans in this particular area that has this kind of insurance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And from that, you may say, okay, there's an opportunity, right? Because the penetration rate of this type of insurance for African Americans is very, very low. So there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity there, right? So that's how you might want to look at it, right? And there's various ways you can get that. You can get that either data from primary or secondary sources.
Well, I do claims, so I would be looking for people who need to use their insurance to pay for claims versus selling them insurance.
Yeah.
So if they have fire damage, they have water damage, their house floods, the storm comes through and rips their roof off. Most of my claims aren't disaster related.
Yeah.
But most people don't know how to use their insurance policy to pay for claims, and that's what I'm here for. Yeah. I represent the policyholders, not the insurance companies.
Right, and so you're on the other side of the equation, and for you there, that would be looking at the percentage of people that hold this particular policy type, and the percentage of those that have used it, and the percentage of those that have actually used that claim, that policy claim, and look at, is there an opportunity to improve that, to raise that percentage up, right? What a lot of insurance companies do, because as you know, insurance companies, they are quick to drop you if you don't pay your premium, but they're slow to pay out on the premium. We know that, and we also know that in general, insurance companies, if they start to get an area that, because I remember when I used to live in Houston, in the floodplains out there, it's very hard to get flood insurance because those can
Right.
be huge claims, right? And so, oftentimes insurance companies, if there's a propensity to have large payouts in a particular area because of certain issues that may arise, it can be very hard to get insurance in that area also. So again, like for you, you're on the other side of it. So you may be looking at the data from that perspective is what percentage does that look like? Those that hold versus those that use. And where's the opportunity to get those that use to elevate that, to lift that up.
Right. Or to call us whenever they have a claim.
Yes.
Whether it's a new claim or they think they have a claim.
Yeah.
Because I do very little marketing. I've been in business for over 25 years. So, but I am looking in the new year to consider some other areas to get into some different markets of my own area of business.
And you can do that. But again, data will help you make those decisions, have better outcomes with that decision making. Though data will help with that. But again, it goes back to that one bullet point that I made is that the question that you're trying to answer informs the data source that you want to use, that you want to tap into. So it's really drilling down for, okay, what question am I trying to answer? What issue am I trying to respond to? What opportunity am I trying to take advantage of? And now I have that. What is the data source that I need to pull on to use in order to help me get to that answer to that question and to drive that response?
Right. And I may call you down the road once I get to where I think I'm trying to go to have a discussion with you about some ideas.
No problem. Let me put in the chat that I want to give it to all. Gotta remember how to do this. I want to give it to all my email. And let me see. How do I do all here? Nope. I want Larry. I want everyone. Okay, there we go. So here's my email. Hopefully everyone got that. And yeah, feel free to shoot me an email, and then I'll probably respond back. Okay. Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it. Great presentation.
No problem. Anybody else have any questions or anything? Larry, I got your message, Michelle. If you guys want to reach out to me, feel free to do that. I'm always open to taking questions, seeing if I can help as much as I can. But again, data is very important to the decisions that you're going to be making, especially when it comes to growth of your business, because it's important to be able to ask that question. Why should we be even thinking about growth? Where and how do we do this thing called growth for our business? Data can really inform, as raising it through information to insights, can really inform that decision making and being input to it. If you be able to grab the right resources, and then be able to formulate the right question that you really want to answer. And data can help you get to that answer that you want in a quality way. Anyone else? Okay. Larry, a little bit, not a lot for me, but it can be a useful tool. Most of the business that I get is through word of mouth, or I speak on a lot of seminars and stuff, present, and also I have access to just about every small business and nonprofit in the United States. So I'll send out cold call information also. Every now and then I'll get an inquiry through my website. But you got to remember, for the most part, people only go to a website when they need to. And people often think that a website is an end all, but it's not. If people don't have a need to go to your website for whatever reason, then they don't do that. But I have gotten some inquiries to that. Search engine optimization, can be important, but you got to remember most of the work that I do is B2B and not B2C. And oftentimes, most of the search engine stuff that you see is B2C. And again, I've got access to every small business name and the leader of it. Most of them, I should say, not all, but most of them in the United States. And I can access just about any nonprofit information that I want. So I can send out direct information. I do a lot of direct outreach to organizations to try to get at least a conversation with the leaders or the decision makers of the business. So yeah. Well, I think that's about our time, people. Again, I appreciate you being here. Welcome, and hopefully something I said will resonate with you and was helpful to you. And I look forward to maybe hearing from you again. So thank you again, and you guys can that'll end this conclude this session. Thank you again.